I am Daniela. I am 42 years old, and only now do I understand that I spent 2 decades confusing love with dependency. I need to tell you something that took me half my life to understand, not because it is complicated, but because it is uncomfortable, and no one talks about it.
Today is February 10th, 2026. 3 months ago, I quit a job I had for 16 years, not because I was fired, not because I found something better, but because I finally understood that I was trapped in a pattern that started long before that job. I am a psychologist. I worked at a foundation that helps families in crisis. Domestic violence, addictions, extreme poverty, difficult cases, cases that keep you awake at night. When I started, I was 26 years old. Recently graduated, full of energy and conviction. I believed I could change lives, and in a way, I did. But I also completely lost myself in the process. Let me tell you how this began. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a primary school teacher. We had an older brother, Andres, who was the pride of the family until he stopped being so. But inside, our house was an emotional minefield. My dad drank, not every day, not in an outrageous way, but enough for us to walk on tiptoes on Friday nights. My mom was the emotional center of everything. She held my dad up when he drank too much. She calmed my brother when he exploded. She took care of me when I cried over anything, and I watched her. I learned. I learned that being valuable meant being indispensable. I learned that love was earned by solving problems. I learned that if someone needed you, it meant you mattered. I remember a specific moment. I was 11 years old. My brother, who was 16 at the time, had failed 3 subjects. My parents had a terrible fight. That night, Andres was locked in his room. I knocked on the door. I entered. He was sitting on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands. I sat down next to him. I didn't say anything. I just listened as he told me that he felt like a failure, that he didn't know what was happening to him, that everyone expected so much from him. When I left his room, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt important. Someone had needed me, and I had been there. That feeling became addictive. When I started working at the foundation, I felt that I had finally found my place. My first case was Sandra, 32 years old, 2 small children, fleeing from a husband who had hospitalized her 3 times. I worked with her for 2 years. I helped her find shelter, then permanent housing. I accompanied her to legal appointments. I saw her children start to smile again. It was exhausting, but it was also the most meaningful thing I had done in my life, or so I thought. Over time, my case list grew. The foundation was short-staffed, and I could never say no. When my supervisor asked if I could take on one more case, I said yes. When a patient called outside of hours, I answered. When there was a need to work an extra Saturday, I volunteered. I became the psychologist everyone sought. My bosses adored me. My colleagues admired me. My patients thanked me with tears in their eyes, and I felt complete until I wasn't. I started having constant headaches, problems sleeping. I would wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about my cases. My colleagues told me I needed to rest, that I was burning out, but I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, I would have to face the question that terrified me. Who was I without this? I met Rodrigo at a friend's birthday party. He was 30 years old, he 32. He was calm, self-sufficient, emotionally stable. When he had a problem, he solved it. He didn't carry trauma. He didn't need to be rescued. At first, it seemed refreshing, a break from my work. We got married when I was 33. The first years were good, but little by little, something in me began to feel uneasy. Rodrigo didn't ask for help. He didn't share his deep problems. He didn't need me the way I was used to being needed. When he had a bad day at work, he would briefly tell me about it and move on with his life. He didn't need me to analyze everything. When he felt anxious, he would go for a run. When we had a disagreement, we would resolve it calmly. There was no drama. There was no crisis. There was no opportunity for me to be the savior, and that started to bother me. Unbeknownst to me, I began to create problems where there were none. I criticized his decisions. I questioned his emotions. I offered solutions to things he didn't see as problems. When he told me something, I turned it into a therapy session. He would say to me, I just want you to listen to me. And I would respond, that's what I'm doing. But that wasn't true. I wasn't listening. I was diagnosing. I was desperate to feel important in his life, but all I managed to do was push him away. Rodrigo started to fade away. He stopped telling me things. He stopped inviting me to his plans. He also stopped trying to connect physically. And I threw myself even more into my work. For years, the foundation was my refuge. There, I mattered. There, they needed me. I worked 12, 14 hours a day. I answered emails at midnight. I took emergency calls on weekends. My bosses said I was the heart of the organization. My patients said I had saved their lives, and I clung to those words as if they were oxygen. Because at home, Rodrigo no longer said anything. The final break came a year ago with one of my patients. Marcella had been in therapy with me for 5 years. I had met her when she had just escaped from a violent relationship. She arrived shattered, and I helped her rebuild herself. We worked together to process the trauma. I accompanied her while she regained custody of her daughter. I supported her when she got a stable job. I celebrated when she moved into her own apartment. She was my success story, my proof that what I was doing was worth it. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, I received her call. "I got back with him," she said in a broken voice. I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "What?" "He showed up 2 weeks ago. He has changed, Daniela. He's in therapy. He stopped drinking. He's different." Everything I had worked for, 5 years, hundreds of hours of sessions, devastated. My first thought was not concerned for her safety. It was betrayal. I felt that everything I had done for her had been for nothing. I felt that she had personally let me down. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, and then I realized something horrible. I wasn't angry because she was in danger. I was angry because my effort had been wasted. I was angry because my success story was no longer a success. I was angry because she had stopped needing me in the right way. The realization hit me like a truck. I had turned her recovery into something about me, about my competence, about my worth as a therapist. I sat in the darkness that night, wondering how many times I had confused helping with controlling, how many times I had needed others to need me to feel valuable, how many times I had used other people's pain to fill my emptiness. The truth was brutal. I didn't help just out of kindness. I helped because being needed made me feel important. And when someone stopped needing me, I felt invisible. The next day, I talked to Rodrigo. I told him we needed couples therapy. He was washing dishes when I told him. He stopped. He left the dish half done. He slowly dried his hands. He turned to look at me with a sadness I had never seen in his eyes, and he said, "Daniela, I don't need couples therapy. I need a wife who sees me as more than a project." The words pierced through me. "I don't see you as a project," I said. "Don't you? Then why is it that every time I tell you something, you give me a strategy instead of a hug? Why do you analyze everything I say as if it were therapy? Why can't you just be with me? I'm trying to help." "I know, but I don't need help, Daniela. I'm not broken. I just need you to be present, to listen to me, to love me as your husband, not as your patient." He was right, and it was devastating to acknowledge it. I had spent 12 years trying to fix something when he was never broken. He simply didn't need me in the way I thought I should be needed, and that had driven me crazy. I started my own therapy the following week. My therapist, Patricia, wouldn't let herself be fooled by my professional rationalizations. In our third session, she stopped me. "Daniela, you can use all the technical language you want, but what you're describing is codependency, and you know it." She was right. Over the following months, I had to face things I had avoided my whole life. That my worth didn't depend on how much others needed me. That loving wasn't the same as rescuing. That being present didn't mean being available all the time. That saying no didn't make me selfish. I had to trace everything back to my childhood, to see how I had learned that being valuable meant sacrificing myself to extinction. I had to admit that I had chosen a profession that fed my need to be needed. It was painful. There were days when I left the sessions feeling shattered, but there were also days when I left feeling like I could finally breathe. 6 months ago, I told my boss that I needed to reduce my workload. She looked at me as if I had said I wanted to quit. But you are essential here. Our patients love you. I don't know how we are going to. And there it was again. Essential, indispensable, necessary. The words I had chased my whole life. But now they sounded different. They sounded like a trap. I know, but I'm burning out. And if I don't make a change now, I'm going to collapse. A month later, I completely resigned. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life, not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I was letting go of the version of myself that I believed was valuable. The heroic psychologist, the savior, the one who was always there. Who was I without that? Now I work part-time in private practice. I only see 6 patients. I have clear schedules. I don't respond outside of sessions except for true emergencies. And I established a rule. If a patient calls me outside of hours more than twice a month, we have a conversation about boundaries. And you know what's strange? I'm a better psychologist now because I don't need my patients to need me. I can see them grow without feeling like I'm losing my purpose. I can celebrate when they no longer require therapy. I can let them go without feeling like I'm losing my identity. 2 weeks ago, one of my patients told me he felt ready to end therapy. My first instinct was panic, to convince him he still needed me, but I took a deep breath and said, "That sounds wonderful. You've done an amazing job." And I meant it. Rodrigo and I are trying to rebuild. I don't know if it will work. There's a lot of damage built up. But for the first time in years, I can be with him without trying to fix it. Last week, he told me about a problem at work. My first instinct was to analyze, to offer solutions. But I stopped and simply said, "That sounds stressful." He looked at me surprised. He continued talking, and I just listened. When he finished, he said, "Thank you. I needed to vent." It was so simple, and it had been out of my reach for so long. We are also starting to have physical contact again, slowly, tentatively. A few days ago, while we were watching a movie, he reached out his hand. I took it. It was something so small, but it felt monumental. I don't know if our marriage will survive. The damage was deep. But at least now I have the chance to love him as a wife, not as a therapist. Here's what I've learned. Being needed is not the same as being loved. You can spend your whole life being indispensable to others and still feel empty. Because when your worth depends on how much others depend on you, you can never rest. You can never let go. You can never just be. Helping can become an addiction. It gives you a high. It makes you feel important. But over time, you need more and more to feel the same. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are health. Saying no does not make you selfish. Boundaries make sustainable relationships possible. You cannot rescue anyone who does not want to be rescued. And more importantly, you shouldn't try. Your work cannot be your entire identity. Because what happens when you can no longer work? Do you stop having worth? Amar means seeing the person, not the project. Rodrigo was never a project. He was a complete person who wanted to be seen, heard, and loved for who he was. I am still in the process. Not everything is resolved yet. Some days it's easy, others I find myself looking for ways to become indispensable again. It's a deep pattern. It doesn't disappear overnight, but now at least I know how to recognize it. If you're reading this and feel identified, listen to me. You don't have to be indispensable to matter. You don't have to be available all the time to be a good person. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to exhaustion to be valuable. Your worth exists regardless of how much others need you. Loving is not rescuing. Helping is not controlling. And being valuable doesn't require someone else to be broken. I am Daniela. I am 42 years old, and only now am I learning to love myself without needing someone to need me. If this story resonated with you, subscribe. There are more stories like this. And if you have your own story, there is a form in the description. Your experience could help someone else. Thank you for listening to mine.